Hello and welcome back to one of my favorite parts of the draft cycle, and that is finding these sleeper picks to this NFL draft. Now, before I did my YouTube channel, I used to love just finding like those late round picks that are going to make a huge impact in the NFL. So some of those recent ones being like a Brock Purdy, Puka Nacua, or even like A.T. Perry, who's found a kind of a role in the New Orleans system, and Aya Pace Jr., who I loved coming out last year. Now, for this episode, we're going to talk about offense in particular, and then in the next coming days, I'll also have my sleeper picks for the defense. So, starting off, we'll talk about the QBs. Now, outside of the top six, all those I can see going in the first two rounds. These next QBs could either go late day two, or early day three picks. And that's going to be Michael Pratt, starting off from Tulane, 22 years old. He is 6'2", 217, and he's a little bit more of a developmental piece, but he has a really good job of keeping the ball safe. I mean, each year he kind of also improved, kept on getting better, but he also consistently kept the ball safe. No more than 8 interceptions a year, and especially the last 2 years, 5 interceptions, keeping the ball out of harm's way. And he's actually a really good scrambler as well. His arm is not the best, but like I said, he's kind of improved more and more each year. So I think like him being a more of a backup role, more of a developmental role, will do wonders for him. He doesn't. He's not really the best at going through his progressions. That's something that my next quarterback does a little bit better job at. And he doesn't have the strongest arm. So both these quarterbacks don't have the strong arm that's really going to like push them into those top six quarterbacks. But they have enough of a skill set that I think that a team could just, who wants more of a field general type that has scramble ability can get in this NFL draft cycle. And that second QB is going to be Spencer Rattler. He's 23 years old from South Carolina. He is 6'2", 211. Now, Spencer Rattler has had a very interesting career, that's for sure. Starting off at Oklahoma and finishing up at South Carolina. He's definitely changed his ways, and you can kind of tell that in interviews. You can tell that by the way that his teammates talk about him. He's not the same arrogant guy that was at Oklahoma, and that's just going to work wonder for him to try to get to a team because they see that he's not going to be more of a locker room cancer. Let's talk about the strengths. So he is a scrambler, and that's kind of evident when you watch him, but he's not like the quickest guy. Obviously, you know, that's still part of his game plan. He can still, get you a first down, but it's not like he's going to be asked. He's not going to be asked to be a runner like a Jane Daniels is. But he's also willing to take shots behind a bad offensive line. South Carolina's offensive line was not all that good, and he was willing to step up in the pocket, knew he was going to get hit, and fire it down the field. But that also goes into one of his weaknesses, and he does not have the best arm. It's kind of evident when you watch, especially when you're watching Xavier Leggett. There's a bunch of deep balls that are underthrown, and he kind of just throws it up there because Xavier Leggett can get to it. As something that was really concerning watching Spencer Rattler. But one of the things I do like about his arm is that he also has a quick release, which will fit that field general kind of role if you want to get the ball out kind of quickly. Um, but not having that arm strength really is kind of a concern for me. But um, the other thing too that's kind of similar to Michael Pratt is that he doesn't really read the field as well as he probably should. He's gotten better. He's gotten better per year, especially being in more of a pro style offense than being in Lincoln Riley's offense. But it's still not up to par that he needs to be still developing. So both these QBs, I think they could be good. You might see them have some kind of action in the season, depending on where they go. But they're definitely developmental pieces to have as a backup for the future. So now we're going to talk about the running backs, who I think actually can find a role in year one, and some of these that I really, really like. Starting off with the first guy, who's been kind of mocked to be like a fifth round pick, and obviously I can see some reasons for that, but that's Isaac Guerendo. He is from Louisville. Well, he was at Wisconsin. Now then he was at Louisville. He is 23 years old. He is 6'2", 220. But man, is this guy fast! Obviously, the talk of the NFL draft. He was running 4.33, but it shows up on tape. His one of his weaknesses is that sometimes it takes him a little bit to get to that speed, but when he hits that speed, no one is going to catch him. Like he has an excellent burst. Um, the other thing too is that he does not have that many carries. So obviously when he was at Wisconsin, he split the backfield with Braylon Allen, and then even when he's at Louisville, they didn't really. They gave him like 100 carries. He had like 600 something yards, like like it's like 6 yards a carry, and he could also catch out of the backfield. So he's a willing catcher. He also does a really good job at being a pass protector. That's something that's like another great thing about Isaac Rendo that I think people are not kind of sleeping on is that not only does he not have that much tread on his tires, not only does he have blazing speed, but he's going to be a kind of person you can put in third down if you need to because he can pass block as well. So I love that about him. He's also a really great ball has really great ball carrier vision. You can see on some of his cuts where he would fit perfectly in a Sean McVay, Kyle Shanahan kind of system, especially those zone reads, zone runs. But the thing that kind of gets me a little bit down on Isaac Rendo is he's not the most agile. It's kind of though he does run through people. Sometimes it takes a little bit for him to accelerate, kind of like I said before. So there are still some concerns, but I think if he finds a role in like those, like if he went to Minnesota, he would fit perfectly in that kind of system um, of Kevin O'Connell. So like he's definitely a running back that will fit in a lot of these schemes that you see popping up all over the NFL. He's the guy to look out for. He could potentially be a riser, but people are not going to be a fifth round pick. I think he'll probably go higher than that. These next two cats, they're a little bit. I don't know why I say cats. These next two running backs, both of them have different skill sets, but they can definitely find a role in the NFL. First one up is Ray Davis. Ray Davis from Kentucky. He's kind of bounced around. He was at Temple. He was at Vanderbilt, and then his last year was at Kentucky. He is 24 years old. He is 5'8", 211. Kentucky tried to put him at 5'10", but unfortunately he's a little bit shorter than that. But I think one of the reasons why it's actually not that big of a deal because he's 5'8", that 211 fills out, and he is a very sturdy and he's an excellent power back. So if you're looking for a guy just to get you, those hard fought yards, that's Ray Davis. But he can also catch out of backfield. He does not have bricks for hands, and that's another thing too. That's something that I have, Ray Davis above some of these other running backs who are just power backs. Like he can be, he's not going to be just a power back. He has a little bit more to his game. The only thing that I'm, not as comfortable with is he's not really agile or fast. But if you're only looking for a power back, then he'll fit that role. So it's not a detriment to him, but it's still going to put him down a little bit low on people's draft boards. Plus, also him being 24 years old, that's a little bit older. But if you get him on a rookie contract, you pretty much have his prime years. So I think you'll still be fine with that. Um, Next up is Will Shipley. I've liked Will Shipley for a while now, especially watching Clemson. But dude is an absolute stud. Like he is 21 years old, so the one of the youngest people that I'll be talking about in the sleeper draft class because this is a very deep draft class. But he is 5'11", 206, and he is not only he's a great runner, but he's a great receiver and a great returner. He more so on kickoffs than he was punts, but still a great returner. He's extremely agile and he has great vision. The only thing is that he doesn't have the best strength, so he makes people miss because he's agile. But like if he has to run through people, he can, but it's not like he's going to break that tackle. That's what's going to put Will Shipley a little bit further down on people's draft boards. But I think he has an excellent role as a third down back. Um, Not to the level of like Isaac Rendo because he doesn't have like that good of pass blocking ability, but just the fact of like how good he is in his route running, he will definitely find a role in the NFL. So Will Shipley is another person to look forward to. Now talking about the deepest part of this draft, and that is the wide receivers. There is a crazy amount of wide receivers in this draft class that are going to find roles. Now, not all of them are going to be like the top three, but a lot of these wide receivers, even going into wide receiver 10, who I will talk about, should probably be drafted in the second round, but might drop down to the third round just because of how many great wide receivers are in this draft class. So, starting off with a guy who I think he might rise up to the second round, but because there's so many wide receivers in this draft class, he might get put down. And that's going to be Ricky Pearsall from Florida. 23 years old. He was at Arizona State for 3 years. Then he transferred to Florida. And unfortunately, with Anthony Richardson last year, who wasn't all that accurate, he still balled out then. And then also last year, with not the best quarterback play either, he still was amazing as well. He is 6'1", 189, and this dude is like he's basically like very very reliable. Just put it like lamest terms, but he's a great route runner and he understands space. Like if you're going against his own coverage, he will find a way to get open. Like that's the thing that I love about him. He does kind of struggle sometimes against man on man, but you can still work through that because he lays out to make every catch. There are so many catches that Ricky Parasol makes that you just look back and wonder how do you even catch. There was one I remember in particular where he just like a one-handed catch, just plucks it out of the air and like gets hit as it happening. I don't know how he's able to just hold on to that ball, but that's what I love about Ricky Pearsall. The other thing too is that he has great acceleration. He's not just your stereotypical white, wide receiver. Him and Lab McConkey are both extremely great route runners, extremely great acceleration through their route, which is you don't see that a lot. Um, but the thing that I wish he did a little bit more is if he broke a lot more tackles. He's not really a yak threat. Um, that's going to ding him down a little bit more. But if you need a slot wide receiver who can play outside, because I think Ricky Pearsall can definitely play outside, he is your guy. He's going to be a great route runner, and he's definitely going to find a role in this in the NFL. So look out for Ricky Pearsall. He's a name people are talking about, but one name that I'm kind of surprised people aren't talking more about, and that's Jermaine Burton. Jermaine Burton from Bama. He was at Georgia when they won their championships, and then came to Bama when Bryce was a starter and absolutely balled out. So Jermaine Burton, 6 foot, 196, 22 years old. Um, he is very physical and he's not afraid of contact. That's easy to see. Anytime that you watch him, he's a deep threat too. So that's the other thing that I love about him is like not only is he speedy, he can find a way to get open, but he's not afraid to sacrifice his body to make any catch, just like Rick Pearsall is as well. Um, and he has incredible catch radius, just like Ricky Pearsall. So I see them kind of similar in the same exact vein. I'll say that Jermaine Burton has a little bit better going against like man to man than Ricky Pearsall does, but I think the main reason why he might be not a lot of people might be talking about him is because he had character concerns, one at Georgia and sometimes at Alabama. But I'm not as worried about it. I've never been, unless it's like egregious character concerns. That's where like I kind of call it a question. But those usually aren't too much of a deterrent, especially if a good locker room culture. If you have a great locker room culture, I think Jermaine Burton's going to fit in there really nicely. But the other thing too is the same exact thing with Ricky Pearsall is that he's not the best yak threat. Obviously, there's other wide receivers in the draft class like Malachi Corley or even Malik Washington who are very, very good after the catch. That's not really their game, but at the same time, they can find a way, role in in the NFL, and I think they're going to do amazing at it. These are my top two wide receivers who I think might go in the third round. Probably should go in the third round, but their names to watch out for too because this is a very deep wide receiver draft class. Now, I have three other wide receivers who all are really good, and they all will find a role in the NFL, but they're probably not going to be drafted until like the fifth round. My first one, and I have loved this guy for like probably like 3 years now, Ever since I've watched him and Devon Achan absolutely tear up Alabama, I've loved this man. This is Anai Smith. Anai Smith, he is 5'9", 190, 22 years old from Texas A&M. Dude is absolutely beast. Obviously, this past year is he kind of recovering from injury in the previous year where he basically fractured his leg, and that's where Devon Achane was actually able to like really show out. Because I loved both of them coming out, but Anaya Smith is an amazing slot wide receiver and returner. Like if you need a returner and you kind of like looking for like for that dependable slot, that is going to be Anaya Smith. He barely drops any balls. Like as much as like we talk about Roman Dunze, who obviously contested catch, like he barely drops a pass. Anaya Smith is that too. Like Anaya Smith, he's a little more compact of 5'9" and 190, and it kind of shows, especially when he's also getting some running back reps. So when Devon Achan and him were at their peak, they were both in the back out of the backfield. They're both lined up in the slot. They were just you know causing all kind of havoc for SEC defenses. But the other thing too that I love about Naismith is that his yak ability. He has great ball carrier vision, and like he's like going to be a real yak threat. Um, that's what I'm saying. If you need a dependable slot, he is going to be your guy. He's a guy that I really like. Who can also play as a kind of like a gadget player if you need him to make those running back reps. The only thing is, and I'll harken back to what I said before, is because of that fractured leg injury, he didn't quite have that second gear that he had in the past. Now, he kind of came along, later on in the season. You kind of saw that a little bit more. So I think that it's not going to be as big of a problem, but that was a kind of concern. But I think that by his rookie year, I think he'll be fine. He'll have his second gear back. But that was one of the things I was really concerned about when I was watching, and yeah, he is kind of more of like a wide receiver three. He's not going to be like the guy, you go outside. Um, but if you need a dependable on the guy in the slot, he is your guy. So that wide receiver three, talking about wide receiver three, is perfect for this next wide receiver. That's Taj Washington from USC. He is 22 years old, 5'10", only 174. He is a smaller guy, absolutely, but he is blazing fast, and he is not afraid to get hit. There are several times where he is the guy that Caleb Williams is looking for. On third down, he is exactly who Caleb Williams is, keeping his eye on. Like, I know this guy's going to get open. And that's just puts a lot of confidence in me that Caleb has confidence in him. So he's also great on special teams. He's a great returner. He didn't return this past season, but he has the previous couple of seasons. And he also would be a really great gunner as well. So he'll probably be in the fifth round, but you can definitely find a role for him. Now, like I said, he is really small, so he will only be more of a slot wide receiver. But if you need a deep threat who will be dependable to get a third down, Taj Washington is your guy. I love Anai Smith more, but Taj Washington as well. He's kind of one I've come a little bit more on later on in the season because I was really diving into Caleb Williams' film. But Taj Washington's absolutely amazing. And because he's kind of small, he does have short arms and small hands, so his catch radius isn't the best. But like I said, Taj Washington, he's not afraid of contact. So you take a flyer him in the fifth round, you will not be disappointed. My last one, he's more of a developmental role, but I really, really like his route running and also his hands. He's kind of newer to the role, and that is Luke McCaffrey from Rice. He is 23 years old, 6'2", 198. He is a former quarterback from Nebraska who then transferred to Rice, became a wide receiver, and he really showed out in the games that I actually watched. Like he was going up for the ball. He cooked one dude. I can't remember. I'm trying to remember the game that I watched, but he actually cooked one dude. Like he's getting better, just learning like how to play wide receiver. But his knowledge of being quarterback also helps because he understands zone. Now, some of the same problems that kind of happened with Ricky Parasol and Jermaine Burton, he has some trouble with getting off a man, but I think that with time you take a flyer on him like in the fifth or sixth round, you kind of teach him a lot more stuff to kind of like add to his arsenal to get open. I think the dude can still make it. I know he's going to be like a later round, but I think he can definitely find a role because of the fact of like he's 6'2", 198, and he's got a really great spatial awareness. Like he's going to be able to get open for an experienced quarterback. Would be more so where I would say Luke McCaffrey should go. But those are the wide receivers that I really like in this draft class that aren't like my top 10. Now, going to tight end, this tight end class isn't really the best. There's the top two guys, obviously Brock Bowers and Jadavian Sanders, and then Case Stover. I think will probably be a third round tight end. I feel pretty confident that Case Stover is going to be the third tight end. But the fourth tight end that I really like, that I think is more of a developmental role, but I think he has a very high upside. That's Ben Sinnott from Kansas State. He is 21 years old, 6'4", 250. I know that he is a former walk-on who basically gained the weight to become a tight end, but he is super duper athletic. Like he has room to improve, obviously, like his blocking and his route running, but the athletic traits show, and he's like a really hard worker. So I think that if you take a flyer him in the fifth round, because tight end kind of usually takes a while to kind of transition, it's not going to be that big of a deal. But I think that he has a chance of making a roster and being a kind of a developmental piece that can definitely, work the middle of the field. And I don't know, I kind of like Ben Sinnott. I don't know, it's just I think mainly because the games that I've watched, he's really come in clutch. Obviously, the Iowa State game, he had like 10 catches for like 150 yards or something like that, 130 yards, like something crazy like that. Um, but he pops off in some of the games that I watch. So I think that might be the reason why I love him a lot. But for the offensive line, though this is a very deep tackle class, I believe most of my top eight tackles are going to go in the first two rounds. Like I really do think because of all the tackles that are getting paid, and for that matter, all the guards that are getting paid, all the talented guards or tackles that are for sure things, I think they're going to be taken within the first two picks. So I didn't include any of them here, but there are some developmental tackles in this draft class that if you want to know my opinion on, heck, if you want to know my opinion on all these offensive players, um, just go to my podcast with Luke McClure, and that is NFL Gurus on Spotify. But before we do that, to finish off the sleeper picks for offense for this 2024 NFL draft, there are two guys from the same exact college that I was only looking for one, but the more and more I was watching the other guy, I can see them both being very developmental pieces. You have kind of like a 2 to 3 year, project on them. And both these guys are from South Dakota State, and that is Garrett Greenfield and that is Mason McCormick. Mason McCormick, I kind of got into, I think it was around Senior Bowl week. He had a really good week, and I was like, who is this guy? And I started digging deeper into him, started kind of see Garrett Greenfield, and then like Garrett Greenfield had a 38.5 vertical, like the highest vertical of any offensive lineman ever, which that's something that you can't teach. That's athletic traits. So I don't have much to say about Garrett Greenfield, so I'll start with him first. He is 6'6", 311. He is 24 years old because he's a 6-year senior, which kind of concerning, but not as much because, like I said, I still see him as being like a developmental piece. Um, his athletic traits really show in film. Obviously in the testing, and then also in film, his athletic traits show he needs coaching. He needs better coaching, and I think if you draft him in the fourth or fifth round, knowing good and well that he's going to be more of like a backup to developmental role, if you have a really good offensive line coach, I feel like Garrett Greenfield can have a decent 5 or 6 year career in the NFL, being a backup, maybe being a spot starter as well. I'm not as high on him, but out of the developmental tackles that aren't going to go in the first two rounds, I like Garrett Greenfield. Now, the interior offensive line, I really like Mason McCormick. So Mason McCormick is 23 years old, also from South Dakota State, and he is 6'4", 309. Now, obviously, if you look at his NFL draft grade, He's a developmental piece, but the other thing too that shows out is what he did at the combine. Not only did he show it in the Senior Bowl, but he also showed in the combine being testing out outrageously at his athletic score. But you can see that on tape too, because his athleticism shows in his pass blocking. He's a really good pass blocking interior offensive lineman, but there are still some concerns, especially with his technique. But at the same time, if you get both these guys, you have a flyer on them in the fourth or fifth round, knowing good and well that you're just giving your offensive line coach a mold of clay. That's Mason McCormick. He can play center. He can play both guard positions. He's really flexible. Like I said, most of his problems are technique. And I feel like if you have a good enough offensive line coach, you can definitely get the best out of these kind of players of athletic traits that you can't teach. So that's my list of sleeper picks in the offensive side of the draft. Now, in the next coming days, I'll have the defensive side of the draft, which there are a lot of great players on the defense side of the draft too. So if you enjoyed this video, of course, like it, subscribe. And if you want to hear, like I said, if you want to hear more about what I think about some of these draft prospects, or if you want to hear my partner Luke McClure's opinion on this draft cycle, hit us up on NFL Gridiron Gurus on Spotify. We usually have out an episode every single Sunday. So we have defense coming up next. So thank you, and see you in the next video.